So this weekend, Terminator 2 is being re-released in theaters, and I thought this is the best time to stop and rank all 8 James Cameron films. And as I wrote that out and I realized James Cameron has only directed 8 films, and one of them is Piranha 2, which is only kind of a James Cameron film. That kind of blew my mind a little bit, but it makes sense because he's only directed one movie in the 21st century. We're approaching very soon, in just a few months, 20 years since Titanic came out. And in the 20 years since Titanic came out, he's only put out Avatar, which blows my mind that such a great filmmaker has only done one movie in the last 19 years and 9 months or however many months it's been. But he absolutely is one of my favorite directors. If he was as prolific as like Steven Spielberg, I might prefer him over Steven Spielberg because the movies that he does are just so phenomenal. And if you just take Piranha 2 out of the list, his set of movies is really incredible. So that's kind of my take on James Cameron in general. I just think he's an amazing filmmaker that just makes very exciting movies that please crowds. That's why he's had back-to-back movies that have become by far the biggest hit films of all time, because he's so good at giving the audience what they want and delivering on all that stuff. With all that said, let's dive in and look at how Rotten Tomatoes has scored his movies over the years. Coming in at number 8, not surprising, is Piranha Part 2: The Spawning with 7%. There's not a ton of reviews counted on it, but it's not a good movie. It's barely a James Cameron movie. Jumping way up from there, actually by a factor of 10, coming in at number 7 is True Lies with 72%. Coming in at number 6 is Avatar with 83%. Coming in at number 5 is Titanic with 88%. Coming in at number 4 is The Abyss with 89%. That one kind of surprised me a little bit. Coming in at number 3 is Terminator 2 with 93%. At number 2 is Aliens with 98%. And coming in at number 1 is The Terminator with 100%. So like I said, if you take Piranha 2 out of the mix, his movies are all very nicely reviewed, and his top 5 are all over 85%. Or you throw Avatar into there, the top 6 are all over 80%. And so very solid list of movies. He's got 100% on a movie that has 57 reviews counted. That's really incredible. And then he has another one at 98% with 65 reviews counted. Those are really, really good numbers. Incredibly impressive numbers for just saying this guy delivered some movies that absolutely please audiences. Critics, are great cinema, great entertainment, and they moved genres forward and improved cinema as a whole. I don't know why I phrased it like that, but they're movies that just inspire people to want to tell stories the way he makes movies. So normally when I do these, I do a poll on my Twitter page to try and get your feedback on them. There was a few too many. Since he has 7 of them, there's not really a good way to divide it up. I thought let's do 80s movies and everything since 1990, which is only 4 movies. I thought about doing something like that, but then you can't really compare the two. And the fact of the matter is that he's got 4 or 5 movies that people might put as number 1, so I couldn't even factor a couple of them out or anything like that. So I didn't do a Twitter poll. Normally I do, but of course, as always, give me your rankings down below in the comment section. I'd love to hear your take on it. And because he's made so many great movies, I'm guessing our lists are going to be so radically different from one another with different people's thoughts. I'm betting Piranha 2 is not going to be at the top of too many people's lists. Beyond that, anything could happen here because people love his movies. I love his movies. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in and start talking about James Cameron's movies. Coming in at number 8 is going to be, of course, Piranha Part 2, The Spawning. Now, this is barely a James Cameron movie. It's really not a James Cameron movie. It's one of these cheap studio movies where they tried to do a blatant ripoff of Jaws, except now it's fish. I haven't seen the original Piranha. I've only seen Piranha 2 because it's James Cameron, so I checked it out. And then I kind of skimmed through it a little, checked it out, I don't know how many years ago, but then skimmed through. There's a version of it on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, it's not really worth seeing because it's like every other generic movie of that era of this type of thing, but it is on YouTube for free. And so I just skimmed through to remind myself what are the different things in it. So it's It really is like a Jaws ripoff where there's people that want to go out in boats and swim in the beach and go scuba diving, but there's fish that are going to eat them. And then there's a guy that is being warned, you got to shut down the beach. You got to shut down the beach. And he's like, no, we can't do that. In fact, you're fired. We need to make money. I mean, all the stuff that was kind of in Jaws that became the cliche after that. It's all present here, except it adds in kind of the smuttiness of slasher films at the time. And so like the opening scene is two people go out to go have sex while scuba diving and get eaten by fish. So it's literally those sorts of tropes of if you go out to sleep with each other alone, you're going to get beaten by the killer. Or I guess in the case of like Jason movies, you'll get impaled by the killer. But I mean, it's that sort of thing. It just adding the smut factor into it, which is in the fact that I'm doing this video the same week that James Cameron has quotes about how Wonder Woman is objectified in her movies, and so it's not feminist, and how people shouldn't be praising it so much because it objectifies her. In this movie, there's scenes in it where there's just girls sitting on a boat talking to each other, and they're topless for no other reason than, hey, we like to look at boobs, so let's put some boobs in there. I mean, it's literally that. There's no possible excuse for why he's doing it. That's the sorts of stuff that he's put in his movies, but he's complaining about Wonder Woman. So this movie, it's not good. It doesn't. Sometimes when you find kind of these great directors that did movies like this before they really got going, it transcends the genre. You can see the hints of their brilliance and their skills in it. And that's somewhat like you could view the original Terminator like that, in that there was a lot of these low budget sci-fi action movies that kind of had horror in them at nighttime. And then he does the Terminator, and it just totally transcends that genre and it's a great film. It's simply, you can't put it in that category with the others because it's so good. That's not the case with this one at all. It's just low budget. It's just like all the things you've seen, and just so many wacky scenes in it. There's like a scene where a lady's at the morgue looking at one of the bodies that's eaten by the piranhas, and then the piranha shoots out of the dead body and starts eating a person. It's just weird as could be. There's a scene where Lance Hendrickson, and he's kind of fun to see him in this, even though he's not good in it. It's sometimes it's not even like one of those things where, oh, you get to see a young Lance Hendrickson much better than the people around him. No, this is like the worst thing I've seen him in. He's flying a helicopter and trying to save the people. It just jumps out of the helicopter, and the helicopter crashes into the water and explodes. We just stuff in it like that. You're like, what? Like, do you just wanted the helicopter to explode? What am I watching? It's not good. It certainly belongs at the bottom. It's not even so bad it's good because it's pretty dull. The action doesn't really get started until like halfway through the movie. It's just a lot of setup of stuff happening. So all in all, one that you can definitely skip. Now, before I jump up to the next spot up on my list, gotta say this out of the way. Like, I'm about to go to my number 7 pick, and my number 7 pick is a movie that I would give like an 8 out of 10. I'm not giving it an 8 out of 10, but I would give it something like that. It's a very good movie. It's a very well-made movie. So just because it's 7 is not a negative statement on the movie. I just think he's done that many great movies. And so there's a huge gap. Piranha 2, bad. We jump up way up here, moving on for the rest of the movies. So coming in at number 7 for me is Avatar. Now, for me, this is, like I said, for the rest of the discussion, taking Piranha out of the mix because it's barely a James Cameron film. It's a Jim Cameron film is what we'll call it. So of the actual James Cameron movies, this is by far the least interesting to me for all the reasons that you've heard from other people say about it. It's Dances with Wolves, it's The Last Samurai, it's Ferngully, it's Pocahontas. It's a story template. It's of the former disgraced military man goes primitive, falls in love with the culture, and then battles advanced society. That's like a very common film structure. And that's not necessarily, I don't even say that fully as a negative. It's to say why it's not something that's as great as the 6 movies above it, where he had more imagination in the story and didn't just build an awesome world, but told a story that had some newness to it. In this one, it's just too much the template. For me, like other people have pointed to something like the Ferngullies and those ones, it seems more similar. For me, it lines up a lot more closely with The Last Samurai, where there's even like characters of the brother that doesn't trust the guy and stuff like that seem to line up even more so. But it's pretty, it's a beat by beat plot to so many of these other movies. And that's kind of why for me that this one, it's the one I rewatched the least of this top 6 because it's the least interesting to me. I think I've only seen it one time since it was in the theaters. And I saw it several times in the theaters because as a cinematic experience, it's amazing. But as his home experience, it's kind of like, all right, I'd rather watch any of his other big movies than this one. All that said, I mean, it's a very solid piece of entertainment. I think I saw it 3 times in the theater. It is, as everyone kind of says, it's the pinnacle of 3D. I mean, the visuals are stunning. I mean, just absolutely stunning what he was able to accomplish 7 years ago. No, I guess now almost 8 years ago with CGI and how still no one's kind of doing what he was doing before. And as much as people would be like, oh, Tarkin, like it's almost there. It's like, yeah, but James Cameron did those blue creatures 8 years ago that actually worked and you bought it. I mean, just stunning visuals. Of course, exciting visceral sequences. Quaritch is a great villain that you love to hate. I wish like Stephen Lang's one of these guys that it seems like every 5 years, it's like we're reminded, oh yeah, Stephen Lang is awesome. This guy needs to be doing more stuff. I feel like that keeps happening because he'd been in stuff before Avatar. Obviously, I mean, he wasn't like a young man in Avatar, but you see him in that and it's like, oh, this guy's so good as a villain. And then he had some stuff and things happened. You kind of forgot about him. Then he shows up in Don't Breathe and you're like, that guy's awesome. He needs to be in more stuff. And so he does need to be in more stuff. So hopefully he gets some more amazing big roles. But I mean, great villain. The fact that I remember Quaritch, I don't remember Sam Worthington's character's name. I don't remember anyone else, but Quaritch is the one that I remember because he's a memorable villain type character. But so overall, it seems just frustrating film to me because the visuals are so good. He's so good at crafting and doing it, but the script is just so by the numbers and what it does. And then, of course, the rant that I've given many times before, James Cameron probably would be my favorite director of all time if he'd done more work in the 21st century. He did plenty of work in the 20th century. 21st century, he just got, I don't know, whatever it was, Titanic curse that he had to only do the best thing ever. And so then he takes almost 10 years to do, or takes over 10 years to do Avatar. It tops Titanic. And then once again, he's locked out of like doing work again, working just on trying to make the best thing ever. And it's stolen, along with Titanic, it's stolen James Cameron from us. And in one sense, I guess he doesn't owe us anything, but at the same time, it's a shame that we're getting so little output from such a great filmmaker. And there's so many things he could have done in this time if he wasn't just trying to craft the perfect Avatar sequel or whatever he's been doing. And the fact that it took him 11 years to put Avatar out and it was a reskinned version of Dances with Wolves. That just blows my mind. So I have a constant bias against Avatar because it took James Cameron away from us. And just even looking, not of all the new other original things he could have told or direction I'm not even thinking about, but there have been rumors about True Lies 2 for years. I'd love to see a True Lies 2. There have been, all sorts of talk of like, what if he were to do another Terminator movie? That's kind of the only Terminator movie I might get excited about. I don't think he would ever do it because I'm pretty sure he's confidently stated his actual feeling on it is that his story's done at Terminator 2 and he might help some people in their fan fiction. But and even though he said like, well, he might produce this new one, I don't think any of that's true. But anyway, sorry. But we've lost all that. We've lost all the potential because of Avatar and because of the 4 Avatar sequels. And it's hard for me to get excited about a bunch of Avatar sequels because Avatar 1, the story of it is so dull. Because it's so familiar. Because it's such a template movie. It's hard for me to go, man, I can't wait to see what he's going to do next with that one. Because his most generic story that he's ever told was Avatar. And that's the one we were getting 4 more stories from it. I'd love to have a sit down with him and ask him, what is going on here? Hey guys, Anyways, I want to talk to you real quick about MoviePass. MoviePass has been the way I've paid to go to the movies for the last 6 months. Essentially, the way it works is you pay one fee per month. For me, for the last 6 months, it's been $45. They just dropped their price down to $9.99 per month. Then they send you a debit card in the mail, and whenever you go to the movies, you use that debit card to buy your ticket at the theater. You have to buy it at the theater. And you can go to one movie per month for just that one fee of $9.99, which, when it's $45 per month, that might not be a good deal for everybody. But at $9.99, if you like going to the movies, it's an insane deal. It's certainly worth the risk of the paying $9.99 per month. It's an incredible deal. I've had a great experience using their service. I think you will too. And at $9.99, it's such a small risk. I don't even know why you wouldn't give it a try if you live in the United States where the service is available. If you're interested in signing up, please use the link down below in the description. It does help out my channel so I can keep doing what I'm doing and upgrading my kind of equipment so we can make these videos even better for you guys. But I am a member of MoviePass. I have been since the price was 4.5 times as much as it is now. I do recommend it. It does help out my channel if you sign up with that link below, so please consider doing so. Well, all that said, let's get back to our video. Coming in at number 6 is The Abyss. So in some ways, I feel like this is kind of the forgotten James Cameron film. I mean, people that know their movies, of course, know that he directed The Abyss. But because so many of his other movies are the best sequel, the best of a genre, the start of a new franchise, so many kind of big phrases you would slap on them, or biggest movie of all time, the next biggest movie of all time, The Abyss kind of gets forgotten a little bit in the mix. And it's a really cool movie that I think people just kind of overlooked because of how much they're overshadowed by all of these other films. So in The Abyss, if you haven't seen it, essentially it takes place on an oil rig that's at the bottom of the ocean. And when there's kind of a big storm coming in, some stuff starts to happen, and there's like a military plot involving a submarine with some nukes on it. And then there's like an alien subplot. And all these things kind of fit together to make for this really tense story at the bottom of the ocean with Ed Harris, Michael Biehn in there. Just a great cast of characters in this really tense situation of trying to like deal with kind of people going crazy at the bottom of the ocean, horrible catastrophes, weather, and aliens kind of thrown into the mix as well. Now, the reason that the movie probably isn't as well received or talked about as much is because the alien plot line to it feels like it doesn't need to be there. In which case, when you take a movie that works as a storm movie, a disaster movie with military guys going crazy, when that movie works in and of itself, and then you just sprinkle aliens into it, it feels really out of place. And especially as you move towards the third act and the alien stuff kind of gets a little bit more bigger in the plot line of where things are going, especially in the director's cut. The director's cut adds a bit more time and expands the alien stuff and kind of what's going on. And it just feels so unnecessary. Like this movie could have been better and worked without having to have aliens show up in the plot line. That's all true, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it's a really tense ride. It's so well crafted. There's so many cool sequences as these driller guys are trying to save the oil rig, as well as stop the military guys, as well as figure out what on earth is going on. This is where you really start to see James Cameron's love for the ocean and being underwater, and him using that in kind of an adventure setting as opposed to, you know, in Titanic of just boat sinking setting. So a movie that overall overlooked by too many people. You need to check this one out if you haven't seen it. I'd watch the theatrical cut, and if you like that one, then check out the director's cut. Don't start with the director's cut. It adds some pretty weird stuff into it, and I'd rather give you try it out on the regular one before you go full aliens in the second one. And when I say aliens, it's not like alien invasion, military guys with machine guns. It's not that sort of thing at all. It's much more kind of aliens kind of from a distance observing and kind of weird things happening amidst all this. It's more that kind of thing as opposed, it's certainly not like aliens at all. So overall, that's kind of my take on it. It's a very interesting film, very well directed. Just the alien thing doesn't fully incorporate well into the story as a whole. Coming in at number 5 is going to be Titanic. And by this point in time on the list, all these are kind of like 9.0s and above for me. These are all excellent movies. So Titanic being at number 5 is me saying I think that this is a really, really good movie. So, of course, this movie went on to be the highest grossing film of all time, won a bunch of Oscars, really put Leonardo DiCaprio on the map and Kate Winslet on the map as people to be around as A-listers, and they have been for the last 20 years. And for good reason. This is a very engrossing movie as you watch through it, whether that's the beginning part of it where it's this love story of people from different classes and the nature of the experience of being on Titanic, different people, it works. I mean, it works just as kind of this love story of these people together, and it works more so for the story in that it actually ties you in on people to care about. It gives you a narrative and a story to go on while a disaster is taking place. Like, some people have been like, oh, let's take one of the most interesting crashes of all time and make it just a sappy Romeo and Juliet type love story. Like, no, it gives us a perspective for an event. It gives us characters to care about for an event as you're trying to overcome things, and that's how storytelling works. Storytelling is not just setting up a camera and watching an event. That's not a story. That's just documenting what happened. This is a story, a dramatized version of it that engrosses you in this adventure of what took place. And so, and it works. You care about the characters, you care about the drama in of it before things start getting crazy. And then, of course, as the ship starts sinking, it's of course, wonderfully crafted, and much like many of James Cameron's movies before, it just slowly ratchets up the tension as you start being like, uh-oh. It gets crazier and crazier as it gets along and more extreme, and like your heart keeps pounding faster and faster as the movie goes along until you get to the end of the movie, and then it's done. And that's very much so the way that this film is directed and crafted. Now, if there's anything I was going to say doesn't fully work, it's the stuff set in the present always feels like we're getting pulled out of our fun adventure to talk with an old lady. And that stuff never was as exciting to me. It could have used maybe half as much of that stuff. It just kind of really drags it down a little bit because it's not nearly as interesting as being on the ship as the story's taking place. So that's kind of my take on it. Very cool movie. Just this one section of it perhaps could have been shorter, or they could have found some way to make it a little bit more interesting. But overall, just a very good movie. And I get why this movie made so much money. Coming in at number 4 for me is True Lies. Now, this is at the peak of James Cameron action movie days. This is the peak of Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie days. This is their follow-up to Terminator 2, and they went, let's just go do a straight, direct action movie, and it is one of the best action movies ever made, obviously along with Terminator 2, but as just a straight-up action movie, this is one of the best ones ever made. I mean, it's like I said, the peak of two of the best at their craft, doing exactly fun, big, glossy, shiny action. And it's a movie that's so good that Tom Arnold is good in it. You're watching a movie and you're like, oh yeah, Tom Arnold, he's awesome in True Lies. You don't say that about anything else Tom Arnold has done, but he's so fun and funny in this movie. The characters are so nicely crafted, as well as the scenario. And in a certain sense, it's like generic action movie setup. If you announced they were doing a movie like this today, people are like, another one of these types of movies. But this movie, because it's so good and captures it so nicely, it transcends just being another generic action movie. Like, so well done. I mean, it's fun. It's funny. The action is wonderfully crafted. And so if you're not excited about the action sequence, you're laughing at like the jokes in the scene. And there's like character arcs through it it's called True Lies. And so it's about the lies and deceptions that are going on in a marriage for different reasons and just the confusion in it. And so that, like, even this marriage relationship is interesting and kind of the directions that they take it and the way they're interacting with each other. Now that goes in the second act, goes a little bit too long in the segment on Arnold investigating his wife's potential affair and kind of where that goes. It goes too long, but the individual sequence of it are all like memorable and funny. Like, if you rewatch them, it's not like you, like, as you're watching this scene, you're like, this is the one that should be removed out. You're like, each one of them is fun and interesting because it's just filled with great characters. And whether it's Bill Paxton as this sleazy car salesman pretending to be someone else, or Jamie Lee Curtis as the wife that doesn't realize who she's married to. I mean, the whole thing is filled with fun characters. So it makes each one of them gets these great scenes where they interact with each other. And once again, with these James Cameron movies, once it gets going, it just does not let up. So you're going through the movie. It starts off with a big, gigantic bang. Second act, like I said, it goes a little bit too long in the exploration of the affair. And then as soon as kind of that transitions from that to the final direction the movie goes, and it's like big, gigantic escape shootout sequence, big gigantic chase on a bridge with Harriers shooting missiles underneath vans, incredible sequence, to big gigantic showdown at buildings with jets sequence. I mean, it's just like awesome action sequence after awesome action sequence. And they're like every action sequence in this movie is great and memorable and funny. And even as I'm saying this, I'm like, maybe I should rank this one higher. But the reality is that second act it bogs it down a little bit just because it's too long. But, just a great movie. And another one that's a little bit forgotten. Because if you're going to talk about great James Cameron movies, if you're the film snob, you go talk about Terminator movies, Aliens, and stuff like that. As you're talking about box office numbers, you of course talk about Titanic, you talk about Avatar, and so True Lies gets overshadowed while being one of the best of its genres. This guy's just done a lot of movies that are the best of something, so you get overlooked just a little bit. Coming in at number 3 is going to be The Terminator. So this is the real first James Cameron movie. Not this weird studio thing, not him making a schlocky Jaws remake for a cheap studio that kind of has second director came in, or I don't know how all that stuff worked. This is the one where James Cameron put James Cameron's vision up on the screen, and just for how the limited budget he had, he's able to make this incredible film that's smart. It has ideas in it of, while in a certain sense, it's a fairly simple 80s sci-fi action horror movie setup of there's someone trying to kill a woman, but someone's trying to save the person. And then there's some quirky high concept. It's time travelers from the future trying to save the future. Like in a certain sense, that feels like a lot of movies from the 80s and the 90s. But it's the best of that type of movie. It's the example of what you can do even with these sorts of high concept ideas and how you craft a great film that's smart. And this movie in many ways kind of plays off the tropes of the genre. So you got the serial killer Terminator at the beginning taking people out. As it gets going, you have the action sequences, but you have to have the expository dialogue scenes, but it manages to take these things that are must-haves that you have to have where you explain the world and what's going on, and it makes it an exciting chase sequence. Later in the movie, as is the case in 80s action movies, you have to have the love scene between our lead man and our lead girl, and this movie finds a way to make that the most important scene in the movie that's so important to the story going on all around it. While it's totally a trope of the genre, and totally justified for the film that they were making. That's the brilliance of James Cameron. And then just with it, it sets up a world and a mythology and a set of characters where you watch this movie and you never even see John Connor, and he's the most important character in the whole story. The guy you never see in the movie, and you go, oh, I want to meet him some point in time. It just so perfectly tells an encapsulated story that feels satisfying conclusion at the end while making you go, I want to see more from this. I could see this. I could see this. You could tell a story about this. And of course, they did a great job in doing that with one of the sequels, and a not so great job with some of the other sequels out there with it, in trying to tell the stories that naturally you'd want to tell from this mythology they created. So, just incredible achievement in what he was able to do for the budget as really a first time getting to tell his original story. An incredible achievement in that regard, and just a great movie. Like at this point in time, these are all best of movies on my list. And even as I'm about to go into my top 2, they're really tied. The top 2 are tied. I think I'm going to change my order as I even saying this, just because I have to pick one to be 1 and one to be 2. But before I go into all of that, if you want to support my channel, do the number one thing you can do to help my channel grow, improve, help me to keep doing what I'm doing. It's to support me on Patreon. It's a crowdfunding site for YouTube channels or blogs where if you enjoy the content that I'm making and you want me to keep doing it, have a couple extra perks in there, and have a little bit of extra say in what I'm doing, you can support me directly financially on Patreon. You give money through this account. It comes out once a month. And essentially, it funds me in what I'm trying to do and allows me to keep doing it. And if that's something you want me to do, if that's something you want me to improve this channel, that's the number one thing you can do to help me out. I've got a number of people supporting me on there. Each month, I'll review some movies for them, take their suggestions. They've got kind of the top priority if they ask me questions for Q&A videos and a number of other things. Go ahead and check that out if you want to support my channel. The link is down below in the description. Please consider doing so if you're able to, if you enjoy my content. With that said, let's move on to number 2 on my list, and I'm going to go with Terminator 2. As I said, this is actually tied with my number 1 pick, which you can figure out what that is if you can do math and know his filmography. But Terminator 2 is an incredible film. It's a film that's the best of its genre, and it's a film that's one of the best sequels of all time, and it's a film that proves that a sequel can be better than the original. It takes the mythology established there, and it doesn't try and tell the same story, though there's some commonalities in the idea of people from the future coming back to the past to save someone, but it takes that concept and does it in a totally different genre. The first one was light action movie that was kind of scary, horror, sci-fi. This one is heavy on the action, light on the horror, and more so on the sci-fi. And so the genre shifts. It's a much glossier film, obviously because the budget was like 10 times as much. And so it's a movie that takes what was great about the original and takes it to the next level. Likewise, it adds a more emotional layers to it, explores kind of the human condition and the idea of personhood and emotions, and finds a way to work that in with a robot. Does so many things so well while telling an exciting story that you care about. And one of the things I love about this movie is it hits the tone right, in that it's a film that has a sadness over it. The whole thing, just from the music to the interactions and just the sense of loss of childhood, the loss of the future, the sadness for what's coming, the sadness for the state of mankind and our tendency to wrong one another, while being hopeful at the same time. And that's a tough balance to hit, and this movie does it so well, and it's able to go to really dark places while at the same time adding humor into it at just the right ways. It just finds that mix. And that's one of the things that's definitely missing from the later Terminator movies, is that they couldn't figure out how to put the humor in there that's in Terminator 2 without just making it jokey and killing the tone. And this one just nails that so well. I mean, it's one of the best movies of all time. Actually, on my list, on my paper, this is the number 1 on my list. And next Tuesday, if I made this video, it would probably be number 1 on my list. But today, it's not number 1 on my list. Today, number 1 on my list is going to be Aliens, another film. Phenomenal film that's a great movie in and of itself, better than the original. I would say Aliens is better than Alien, and just a masterclass in how to make a sequel that takes what works about the original, take it to the next level, and add new emotional levels to it. And so here you have what started out as an isolation, small group of people being killed off. Here you have more people, military trained people, sent in a situation, so it becomes more of an action movie in that. And much like the Terminator in many of his other films, it starts off kind of slow and just keeps ratcheting up the tension as it gets going. And once you hit about the halfway mark, it does not let up until the end of the movie. And what I love about this movie is that you have Ripley as, I would say, probably the strongest female lead character in a movie, especially in kind of this action sorts of movies, because she's not in any way masculine. She's not in any way like, hey, let's girls can be just like guys, and so let's have this girl character just be beating up the guys just like all the men. It's not like that at all. It's not crafted to just try and show you the girls are just as tough as guys. She's fully feminine. She's very maternal in that, especially in the director's cut, you learn that her family's died in the time sleep, but times that she was away, but she takes on a motherly role towards Newt, and so she has a motherly sense of protection and will do whatever she needs to do to keep this girl and these people safe. So she's entirely feminine while being strong and action-based, and I have to save these people, and I will do what I need to do. And here, this is someone that you see could be a real person in a scenario, stepping up in a situation that's horrifying because of their past, because of their present, what they know, what they have to do. That's what Ripley is. I love her character. I love her character arc in this. And that's why I hate Alien 3, because it undoes all of that in a screws up the mythology, it screws up the victory of this film. It cheapens this movie. So for me, that's just apocryphal crap. That's the movie I hate more than any other movie in existence, because this movie's so good, has such an amazing arc that lands so nicely. And such very wonderfully crafted movie, wonderfully cast movie. So many of these actors, just you look at the cast of characters in it and how there are people that had careers that went on for a long time. So amazing film, love it. I wish that they actually would do one of these. They keep talking about doing a sequel to Aliens that ignores all the other stuff and just picks up not right after Aliens, but 30 years after Aliens with Ripley, Newt, all that stuff. I would love it if they would do that. Anyway, that's my ranking of the films of James Cameron. He is one of my absolute favorite directors of all time. If he'd put out more movies in the 21st century, he probably would be my top filmmaker of all time. But because he's kind of taken his time with all these Avatar movies, I can't quite go there because he just hasn't been prolific enough of a filmmaker for me to view him that way. But anyway, how about you? Put your list down below in the comment sections. Tell me what series or directors or actors you want me to rank their films or do a top list, top 5 list, top 10 list for the movies. I'd love to have your feedback on that. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, ranking videos, like the one you're watching right now. But I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies with you. So join me in the comment section, ask your questions, put your rankings down below, and thank you for watching.